In 1977, Debra Lee Lopez was a 21-year-old woman living in Phoenix. On March 12th, Debra was looking for her boyfriend. She would go into a tavern on Buckeye Road in Phoenix. There she saw some acquaintances of hers: Jorge Castro, age 19, and brothers Luis and Alonzo Mata. Luis was 25 and Alonzo 18. After a little bit, the two invited Debra and Jorge back to Luis's apartment to watch some television, and they agreed. About 10 minutes after arriving at Luis's apartment, Debra got up to leave, but she was stopped by Luis. He grabbed her by the hair and said he was going to rape her. He began beating her with his fists. Alonzo grabbed a rifle and began beating her with the butt of it. She was dragged into the bedroom, where Luis and Alonzo Mata took turns raping her, each 3 times. She was continually beaten and lost consciousness twice. Somehow, Debra made a dash for the door and made it outside, but the brothers dragged her back inside and resumed their horrific act. They even pulled out chunks of her hair. Jorge Castro would later tell police that both he and Debra were held at gunpoint and that he felt his life was in danger if he intervened. He overheard the brothers say that they were going to kill her so that she could not identify them. As Luis and Alonzo carried her through the apartment, they asked Jorge to open the door so they can put her in the car. Jorge opened the door, and then he took off running. Luis and Alonzo put Debra in the car and left. Jorge ran to a neighbor's and called police. Police arrived at Luis Mata's apartment and talked to Jorge Castro. As he described what happened, Alonzo and Luis pulled up. Jorge identified them, and they were arrested on the spot. The body of Debra was found around the same time by a passerby. She was found on the side of the road, on the east side of 67th Avenue, just south of McDowell Road. Debra Lee had been stabbed in the chest, and her throat had been cut to the point where she was nearly decapitated. Jorge Castro told police what he witnessed. A neighbor of Luis Mata said that they saw Alonzo throw a rifle in the station wagon, and that they saw Luis carry something to the car. Luis Mata and Alonzo Mata both gave statements. Search warrants were obtained, and police located the rifle and a shirt and other evidence. Luis admitted he stabbed Debra and slashed her throat, and then pushed her out of the car as they were driving. Both confessed they had been drinking and using heroin that night. Both brothers were found guilty of first-degree murder, and they were both sentenced to death. 1 year later, because of changes in Arizona's death penalty law, they were retried. Luis got the death penalty again, but Alonzo, because of his age at the time of the murder, he was 18, he got life in prison. Luis Mata was on death row for 19 years. Through appeals, examinations by psychologists who said that Luis couldn't have given a valid confession because of his mental condition. His IQ never tested higher than 80. He had a stay of execution in 1995. As his execution date neared, Alonzo would change his story, saying he killed Debra, not Luis. Jorge Castro recanted his testimony, saying he witnessed Alonzo beat and rape Debra, not Luis. But the court system did not believe the bullshit. A 10-hour clemency hearing occurred in which Mata's attorneys, friends, and relatives argued that, in today's terms, he had an intellectual disability and that he was brain damaged. They said his organic brain damage makes him unable to control his conduct. An article appeared in the paper talking about how Luis had a hard upbringing with an alcoholic and abusive father, how he was the 15th of 16 children in his family, that they were poor, and when he was 6, he fell off an ice truck in Texas and fractured his skull. Luis said before the board that he did not kill Debra Lee, but that if he had been sober, he would have prevented what happened. They were able to put up a good argument because Luis Mata was alive, and he could defend himself, and he did, and he had others defending him. Debra Lee was unable to defend herself. She couldn't tell the people at the hearing about the fear she felt when she was prevented from leaving. She couldn't tell them how it felt to be raped by two men, beaten into unconsciousness, have her hair ripped out, her body violated. She couldn't tell them about the feeling she experienced when she realized that she wouldn't make it out alive. Debra did not get the chance to describe the things that make her happy, how much she loved her parents, her plans for the future. Debra did not have a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or any doctors defending her, telling about her mental state as she was being tortured. No one could describe the pain she felt when she was stabbed or when her throat was cut, rather when her throat was sawed to the point that she was nearly decapitated. No one could describe the feeling of helplessness Debra felt, knowing someone else was there, but was too afraid to help. No one could express how smart Debra was, how much she wanted to live. No one talked about her upbringing. Debra's mother, Lola Rotman, testified at the clemency hearing, begging the board to carry out the sentence imposed. She said, "Luis Mata totally destroyed our lives. I can't understand why this sentence hasn't been carried out." The State Board of Executive Clemency voted unanimously against clemency for Mata. Luis Mata told Corrections Director Terry Stewart, "Tell everyone I'm sorry." He was executed by lethal injection on August 22, 1996. He was 45 years old. Debra's parents witnessed the execution. Luis Maureen Mata is buried at the Queen of Heaven Catholic Cemetery in Mesa. Alonzo Mata is still in prison to this day. The apartment complex where Luis Mata lived and where this all happened was torn down long ago. It is now a business. Services for Debra Lee Rotman Lopez were held at the Chapel of the Roses, Larry Melcher Mortuary. She was survived by her parents and two grandmothers. Debra Lee Rotman Lopez is buried at the Mountain View Funeral Home and Cemetery in Mesa.